and I'll get started on this. So starting off, obviously want to make sure we're on the right unit system. So I'm in millimeter gram second. That's great. I'm going to go ahead and change my unit material to stainless steel. I just want to get those things out of the way as early as I can. Doesn't say if it's sheet or bar, but they have the same density. So I don't really care. So I'm just going to use bar. Makes more sense than steel in this case, or makes more sense than sheet in this case, I should say. I'm also given an ABC dimension inside the quiz. So whenever you're given that, you definitely want to use your global variables. So I'm going to go into equations, specify that A is 55, B is 170, and C is 15. If you wait and do that later, you're going to suffer because you won't have the dimensions when you want them. That's all the setup that I need. I like to start by making very simple geometries. In the bottom here, I have a box that is B by 15 by A. So I'm going to go to the front plane. I'm going to sketch. I'm going to use a corner rectangle to draw the width. I'm going to specify the width as B. So equals to, make sure you use the equals to. If I don't use the equals to, it's not going to say that as an equation, and I won't be able to update the dimension in the future. At least not automatically using my equations. The height is 15. And I'm actually going to go through and I'm going to mark these off as I get them because I don't want to use the equations, the dimensions more than once if I can. I'm going to extrude this to a width of A, so equals to, again, equals to A. In this case, since I don't have any symmetry here, I'm not going to bother changing this to midplane. And I know that I want all those back walls to line up, so I'm just going to leave that as a blind extrude. Again, I'll mark off the A on here. Then I'm going to start working on this kind of upper, more complicated geometry. I'm going to go back to the front plane, and I'm going to sketch on the front plane. I'm going to start on the left side and just kind of work my way across. So starting with the line tool, coming up, I'm going to try and transition to the arc. There's an arc there. I'm going to try and get to another arc. There's the other arc there. And then I'm going to come across to close that off. That's the basic shape. I have the 15 degrees here, so we'll get that. Mark that off. I have a outer radius of 80, so I'm going to specify that this radius here is 80. I've got a smaller radius here of 40, so I'll specify that as 40. And I do want to try and put these dimensions in the same spot as they are given to me in my drawing. It makes it easier for me to kind of check and see which ones I've done and which ones I haven't done. I've got the center of this arc specified. I've got 35 over and 20 up from the top of this rectangle. So I'm going to specify that the center of this guy here is 35 over and 20 up. So try and get that here. Then I'll mark these ones off. And let's see here. What else do I have? I know that one's 40. Oh, I know I want the centers of these two circles to stay lined up, and currently they're offset. So I'm going to try and get these two centers to line up vertically. And I know that because they're both on top of that same line there. That says fully defined, but does not look correct. What am I missing? Or do I have something wrong? This is 40. Oh, that's diameter 40. It should be, so I have radius. So if it's diameter 40, I want radius 20. So note on here, I have this as a diametric. I can change that there. Now it matches. And that looks okay. And I need to close off the bottom because this is not a closed cross section. So I'm just going to convert this bottom line. And then I'm going to extrude this to a width of 10. So 10 millimeters. Again, mark that one off there. Accept that. And now I can start putting these slots and holes on here. I'm going to go from the front plane again because I have this width is 15. So I want to be able to type that in without having to do any kind of math. So I'm going to sketch on that one. This complex feature here is really just a curved slot. So I'm going to use a center point arc slot. I'm going to get the same center as where I started from. And I'm just going to draw this out. Oh, I want it to go the other way. Something like that. And then I'm going to add the relations to this to get it set up. So this guy and this guy are actually co-radial. So I'm going to get that last arc and this arc here. And if it'll let me. There we go, co-radial. This bottom point is horizontally aligned with the center. So I'll get those 2 points. I'll try and get the point first. Maybe let me do it that way. Doesn't like it. Doesn't like to give me that because of the slot tool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna make a center line that goes from here to here to here. And then I'll use that center line to allow for the horizontal relation. So make that horizontal. And then I also have a nice line there to use for this 60-degree angle. There's my 60. That's pretty nice. And then this inner radius here has a radius of 50. So I'll specify that this is an R of 50. Again, I already specified the 80, so I don't want to do that one again. So there's my 50, I use that. There's my 60, I use that. And then I'm going to go ahead and extrude this to a height of 15. So I'm going to go to features, extrude, 15 millimeters from the base, accept. I'm going to click on that. I'm going to sketch on this face. I'm going to do an offset of 7. And I'm going to reverse it so it's coming in. And then I'm going to use that to do an extruded cut. I'm going to have that go all the way through. Again, the only dimension I use there is the 7. I can mark that one off. I've got this hole up here on the top, same basic setup. Go to the front plane, sketch that hole. Actually, I'm going to sketch the outer portion of it first. Again, making this co-radial with this arc. That one's a little bit less, or sorry, not co-radial, concentric. Concentric. A little bit less obvious because I don't have trailers going through here, but I don't have anything else specifying where that's supposed to be. So I'm just going to assume that that's what that is. It's a good assumption. Even outside of, like the problem that I made. 15 again, remember that SOLIDWORKS is going to save your properties. So if you used an extrude of 15 on the previous extrude, the next one you do is going to be 15 by default. So if you can put all the same size extrusions in the same kind of timing, then it's going to make it easier for you to save a little bit of time there. And just sketching that hole, cutting the hole out. Then I'll do the bottom circles here. So I'm going to sketch that. I'm going to do a circle 1, circle 2. Specify the positions of these. I didn't cross off my dimensions on that yet. So that's 20. 20. And 2 times C in diameter. So it equals to global variables C, oh, not B, C times 2. And then I'm going to make the other one horizontally aligned with that and equal in size. That TYP, that means it's typical. It means that's the typical size of that part. So if you see typical and there's 2 features that look like they're the same, then they're the same. I'm going to cut extrude these to a depth of 5 millimeters, which is I didn't actually include on the drawing. Apologize for that. And then I'm going to sketch on this new plane. And we'll get those concentric with my original circles as well. And they are going to have a diameter of just C. So equals to global variables C. And I'll make them both equal as well, just rather than adding the same dimension twice. Then there's going to be an extrude cut all the way through the part. So again, I got the C dimensions here, the 20, the 20, the 75. I know I'm not being very good at marking these off as I go. The 15, the 25 for the outer circle there, and the 10 for the inner circle there. I've used all my dimensions. I've got my part done. I should be able to evaluate match properties, and I get 1767.28. And I can compare that to the options. Let's match one of them. Go to the next part. And so I'm going to go back to the new drawing. We're just adding a feature to this, and we're changing our ABC. So if you're changing ABC, check your that first. This is gonna be the first thing you want to do, just so you don't forget. Because once you start modifying the part, it's very easy to kind of forget to go in and make some changes. So I'm gonna change this to 184 and 10. You guys will all get different values for B. So don't just type in my values if you're following along. I'm gonna rebuild this, just so I know those changes have actually been updated inside the part, and we should see it change size a little bit. And then I need to draw a tombstone shape on this face here. We've got it over 0.35 or 35 and up 20. It's probably in the same position as the center of this arc, but since we're given that dimension again, I'm going to go ahead and draw it again using those dimensions in case the intention is for those to be independent. So I'm going to draw up, arc transition, down, crossed, features, dimensions. This is going to be 35 over and 20 up. And it's going to have a radius of 20. So again, on my sketch here, if I want to get my drawing tool out, I can mark these off. Not that one yet, sorry. Can I undo? Maybe not, I gotta erase. That one we haven't gotten yet. We got a 35 though. That's good, and this is fully defined, so we're good. We'll extrude that out. I need a width for how far out that's going to go, which apparently I don't have. It should be on this view. Did not do a good job making this drawing for you all. 30? 35? I don't remember what that's supposed to be. Looks like it should be a little bit longer than that. Let's say 40. I can verify my dimensions are close using this side view. So if I go to view planes, this one should look like that one. Looks like that's not quite enough. It's probably supposed to be 45. That looks like that's right. Maybe it's 42 or something, but it's close to that. You can see where the line would intersect with that hole on the background here. I need to update that to give you guys better drawings. And then I'm going to sketch on this front plane. I want to get that center circle. It's going to have a diameter of 20. And I'm going to use features, extruded cut, and through all. And then this last little piece here is actually a rib. Meeting controls were hiding another back. And it's got a 1 millimeter offset on the top here. This one's a little bit tricky to pull out because I need to be able to draw that line. And so I wanted to make sure I had time to get to this with you all. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a reference plane that goes to the center of that. So to get that, I'm going to use an axis that goes to the center of that circle. I'll change back to a 3D view, make it a little easier to see. And then I'm going to use a reference plane that is parallel to my right plane, but also goes through this axis. And that gives me a line that, or at least a plane that I can draw this line on. And then I'm going to sketch the line with a little bit of an offset to the start and end of these circles here. And I'm going to set the distance of that offset to 1 millimeter. And then I'm going to go into my rib tool and specify a width of 6 millimeters. Now, when making this part, I think the original intention from Marza was to have this come up to the edge. The reason that won't work is that, as you'll note on the side here, you see how it kind of gets a little bit narrower closer to the top? Like this distance here is a little bit wider than this distance here. If I have that line come up all the way to the top, the extrusion for the rib is now higher than the surface it's trying to go out to, and you can't resolve that geometry. So I need to make sure that these ribs start at or below the surfaces that they're adjacent to. Otherwise, it won't work. And I noticed that in Mars' example that she submitted, she actually had that feature as a separate part that was extruded, and it wasn't merged with the original geometry of the rest of the components. So, weren't quite getting what you wanted to out of there. You can have this kind of come on top of this surface here, as opposed to coming onto the side of this one. And that would work fine. You would just need to know how far up onto that surface you wanted it to go. So if I wanted to do something like this, that would be fine. But I need to make sure that that edge doesn't kind of cross that point there. I hope that makes some amount of sense to y'all. And I don't know if my offset here is right, but I'll go and evaluate anyways. I need to repost this with some updated geometry. I got 220900. Let's see if I get it right.
If you didn't modify, that one was 35.
If I didn't modify it, that would be right. It says I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did modify
Yeah,
some.
that one was 35. If you didn't modify, that extrusion was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So any questions on any of the features that we use there? I'll also note that the way that I made this is not the way that I made it when I made the part initially, looking at Mars's drawings. And that's okay. I wanted to do this a little bit more step by step when I was doing it for you all. But if I want to, I'm trying to figure out how to get to files in here. If I want to put a bunch of the geometry all on the first sketch, I can do that. So this is the same part, more or less. But on this one right here, that is the first sketch that I drew. It's got almost all of the geometry inside that sketch. The advantage of that is you have all the features inside the sketch that you can use as a reference for other things. So I still use all the same tools. I still use the slot tool. I still use the offset. I still used all the tangents and dimensions exactly the same. I just, instead of putting them into separate sketches, they're all in one sketch. The hard thing with that is that when you do the extrusions, you have to tell it which contours you want to use for every extrude. So every one of these extrudes is using a different section of that sketch. And I'm putting them together in kind of an intelligent way, working from the base out, because they all need to be connected to each other. You get the geometry that I want. And then the cut extrudes are just there. Again, the cut extrudes, I also did some of the same, pretty much the same thing as I drew both circles, cut it out, and then cut it out. A lot of times I don't recommend doing it this way because this way is actually less resilient to changes in geometry than if you let the sketches be independently set up with one sketch for one feature, like I did in the example here for you all, because there's less dependencies between kind of the same idea, the same part. You can kind of see how that builds out a little bit more logically than some of the models that I had on the previous one. And I don't end up with like weird geometries as I'm going through the part. Whereas on this one, I get some weird geometry because I have that donut cut without the hole cut out. And I have like this back plate with the slot cut out on it before I get kind of the centerpieces. So there's advantages and disadvantages to using kind of both those methodologies. Yeah, one is not necessarily faster than the other either. I think both of them can be done pretty quickly. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, well, I'm gonna stop the recording. We have a few minutes left in class. Try and stop the recording.